the road. Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. A wake-up call. The Energy Secretary orders an urgent investigation into the power shutdown at Heathrow. Flights have now resumed, but passengers are still being warned to expect delays and cancellations. Tribute to a big hitter. Former world heavyweight champion George Foreman dies, aged 76. Protests across Turkey over the detention of the mayor of Istanbul, President Erdogan's main rival, on terror charges. Six-figure payouts offered by Harrods to victims of sexual abuse by Mohammed Al Fayed if the claimants agree to psychiatric testing. And doctors say the Pope is well enough to be discharged from hospital tomorrow. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. The Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, has ordered an urgent investigation into the power outage at Heathrow Airport. He says he wants a clear picture of what happened so that it's prevented from ever happening again. Tonight, the airport's chairman has announced that an internal review will be launched, chaired by former Transport Secretary and independent board member Ruth Kelly. Today, the airport is back up and running, but thousands of travellers are still in limbo. The National Grid says it's deeply sorry for the disruption, which airlines warn could last for several days. And experts warn the outage has exposed serious vulnerabilities in the nation's infrastructure. Well, hundreds of additional staff were called in to help clear the backlog, with extra flights added to facilitate an extra 10,000 passengers. British Airways, whose main hub is Heathrow, says it's been able to deliver around 90% of their 600 scheduled departures and arrivals. Sky's Adele Robinson reports.
As the fire still smoulders, its impact continues to be felt worldwide. Thousands of flights cancelled at a cost of millions. Europe's biggest airport, Heathrow, now reopened, but with a global backlog.
Even though I'm looking like I'm kind of smiling, it's really not fun.
Elizabeth's been stuck by herself in New York for nearly 48 hours with her service dog.
This is people who put their well-earned money into this arrangement to come away, and they're losing days and days, and they're ending up in different cities, and they're alone. It's very scary because you just don't know what you can do, and there is no help.
Miriam and Kent are also stranded in South Africa.
We really want to get home because I'm 30 weeks pregnant and we'll both be missing work. So I really would like to be back on British soil, to be honest, just to make sure everything's fine. And I don't think the stress is helping much.
The fire broke out at an electrical substation 2 miles from Heathrow late Thursday night, cutting power to the airport. Cooling oil on a transformer at the substation had ignited. The cause is unknown but not suspicious. The Energy Secretary, however, has ordered an investigation, saying, "We are determined to properly understand what happened and what lessons need to be learned. That's why, working with Ofgem, I've today commissioned the National Energy System Operator to carry out an investigation into this specific incident and to understand any wider lessons to be learned on energy resilience for critical national infrastructure, both now and in the future." It should answer questions over the airport's apparent reliance on a single power source.
This is where a piece of critical national infrastructure, Heathrow, was brought down. The focus now is on how quickly or even easily all this happened and how it exposes potential vulnerabilities, not just here, but across the rest of the country, that could be exploited.
Heathrow's boss is also supporting the government-backed investigation. Experts say changes may need to be made.
There'll be a lot of bits of critical infrastructure that are very dependent on key energy transmission lines or substations like this one. I'm sure there'll be many places across the country that are similar. So it does beg the question of whether the system is resilient enough, whether we need to have new resilience standards.
As well as Heathrow, which is launching its own review and supporting a government-backed investigation, airports around the world will now be looking at their own systems now, as the effects of travel disruption last until next week. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
Let's speak now to our political correspondent, Rob Powell. And Rob, 2 investigations announced today into the disruption at Heathrow. What more do we know about those?
Yeah, one's an internal probe launched by Heathrow Airport, chaired by the former Labour Transport Secretary Ruth Kelly, that will look into how the airport responded, how robust its plans were, and what could potentially be done to strengthen resilience in the future. Then there's a broader inquiry ordered by the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, that will look into how that substation fire occurred, how the power was cut, and how what lessons can be learned for other areas of critical national infrastructure. Ed Miliband also linking that inquiry to Labour's broader political aim of strengthening energy security and resilience as well. A big part of the pitch from this government is about trying to reverse the lack of investment in infrastructure over the years that's made some parts of the country unproductive and unreliable. I think in that context, many people see what happened as Heathrow as emblematic of some of that apparent decline. You'll remember the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, changed some of her rules around spending to put more money into infrastructure. So I think what happened at Heathrow yesterday will likely be seen as a wake-up call of the task ahead.
And Rob, talking of tasks ahead for the Chancellor in particular, Wednesday we'll see Rachel Reeves deliver an important update on the state of the public finances, and there's more detail of what we can expect in the papers this evening.
Yeah, details of the savings, details of the cuts that may well be necessary that we will likely hear about on Wednesday because of the disappointing growth forecast that will likely come forward from the Office of Budget Responsibility and the impact that will have on the amount of money that Rachel Reeves has to spend. And in the Sunday newspapers that we're starting to get through this evening, we have an interview in The Sun on Sunday where Rachel Reeves says that Labour will use its big majority to force through the welfare changes that have been so controversial within the party. And we also have more detail of where money will be saved on the civil service, on government employees that work around the country, but also here in Westminster. They say that they want to save 15% on administrative budgets in various departments by 2030. That will give over £2 billion worth of savings, mainly from what they say is back office jobs like admin, HR, policy, comms, rather than frontline services. But we also have an indication of the political challenge ahead for Labour as well. Research from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation think tank that suggests that by 2030 the average family will be £1,400 worse off compared to where they are now because of rising housing costs, stagnating real incomes and frozen tax thresholds. Now, the big promise from the government is that when all of this pain is out of the way, by the time we get to the next election, people will starting to feel better off. That is the big promise from Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, that they say put up with the pain now and it will be worth it in the long run. On this evidence, and we've got a long way to go, but on this evidence, it seems that they are still some way off meeting that pledge.
OK, Rob, thank you very much. And a reminder that on tomorrow, Sunday morning, with Trevor Phillips, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, will be in the studio. Also on the show, the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, and the Liberal Democrats Treasury spokesperson, Daisy Cooper, all here on Sky News from 8:30 tomorrow morning. To Turkey now, where thousands of people have taken to the streets to protest against the detention of Istanbul's mayor on terrorism charges. Mayor Imamoglu, who's a main opposition rival to President Erdogan, denies the charges. The protests have gone ahead despite the Turkish leader's warning that street protests would not be tolerated, and police have fired tear gas and pepper spray at the crowds. Well, earlier tonight, President Erdogan accused the opposition of trying to create an atmosphere of tension and chaos.
I believe it is worth reminding once again that the days of going out into the streets, taking left-wing organizations, extremists and vandals with you, and threatening the national will are now behind us. The days when politics and justice were directed through street terror are now completely a thing of the past, along with old Turkey.
President Erdogan speaking there. Tributes are being paid to the American heavyweight boxing legend George Foreman, who's died at the age of 76. He's being remembered as a great champion, a man of faith, and somebody as successful in retirement as he was in the ring. Sky's Rob Harris reports.
Boxing's greatest fight was George Foreman's most devastating. The rumble in the jungle humbling by Muhammad Ali was so brutal, so unexpected.
Yeah, it was like I was mugged in the jungle. I went there with 2 title belts. I came home with none. It was really strange. I thought I'd knock him out in 1 or 2 rounds, but about the 3rd round, I'd hit him, and he fell on me. I thought, that's it. And he started screaming, "That all you got, George? Show me something." And I knew then I was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
But it became the making of a sporting giant's reinvention, redefined by redemption and resilience. After growing up in the segregated American South, Olympic gold was won in 1968. Knocking out Joe Frazier in 1973 made him heavyweight champion of the world and the most feared and formidable of fighters. Until that unbeaten record ended in the iconic bout with Ali. A night in Kinshasa that transcends boxing. But from the animosity, a friendship blossomed.
We became the best of friends. And he would talk and all of his exploits, but he didn't want to bring up about him beating me. I said, yeah, you defeated me.
And boy, I fell in love with the guy. We were, even till, you know, I still miss him today.
Foreman had turned to religion. He was ordained as a minister when Ali inspired a comeback. The belts were reclaimed at 45, becoming the oldest man to wield a world heavyweight title by beating Michael Moorer. The same year, 1994, his name was put to this.
Steak? Sure. Paninis?
Easy. Finding a new level of fame with his lean, mean grilling machine and earning a $200 million fortune far eclipsing fighting earnings. Showing second acts are possible.
Great tasting, healthier food in minutes.
Announcing his death aged 76, Foreman's family remembered a life marked by unwavering faith, humility and purpose. A humanitarian, an Olympian and two-time heavyweight champion of the world, he was deeply respected. And the mindset guiding future champions.
It was an emotional and spiritual battle for him. You know, it wasn't just about the brute force. You know, early on in his career, it was about brute force. As he got older, he actually adapted his style. He changed his style. He did a cross-arm defence. You know, I've definitely got some nuggets from him that I've implemented into my career and still do today.
The boxer who became a cultural icon, forever associated with the most epic of sporting contests. Rob Harris, Sky News.
George Foreman, who's died at the age of 76. Now, Sky News understands the government is considering sending failed asylum seekers to migrant centres in other countries. The news comes as the number of migrants crossing the Channel so far this year tops 5,000. Here's Sky's Gurpreet Narwan.
Arriving in Dover after a perilous journey by sea. They're hoping to start a new life in Britain, but our government has other ideas. Sky News understands ministers are weighing up plans to send asylum seekers whose claims have been rejected to migrant hubs abroad. According to some reports, countries in the Western Balkans could be paid to house these migrants. The government is looking to Italy, which has a plan of its own to send migrants to Albania. The hope is this will deter migrants from coming to the UK in the first place. But it's all sounding a bit familiar.
I'm actually glad that the government scrapped the Rwanda scheme because it wasn't working as a deterrent. In fact, hardly anybody went, and it was costing huge amounts of money. If they've got a better scheme that will work, we'll look at that.
Labour railed against the previous government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda.
We won't operate the scheme at all. I'm not interested. It's a gimmick. I'm not going to flog a dead horse.
But this proposal is different. Asylum seekers would first have their cases heard, and only those who have been rejected would be sent abroad. But the Tories don't see it that way, with the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp saying it proves they were wrong to cancel Rwanda before it even got started. And refugee charities see it as another gimmick.
If you assist people to return with dignity, like voluntary returns, just help them with the tickets, help documents, also give them a small amount of money for their settlement, that's far more effective.
And this is the challenge. Hundreds of migrants have arrived on small boats over the past couple of days, taking the total for the year to date to nearly 5,300. That's 22% higher than the same time last year, even though Labour promised it would get the numbers down. Starmer said he would smash the gangs to tackle the issue at its root. But with the charts still going in the wrong direction, he's now considering a more familiar route. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
Israel has struck Lebanon in what it claims is retaliation for rockets fired at Israel. It's the heaviest exchange of fire since the ceasefire with Lebanese militant group Hezbollah began near the end of November. The Israeli Prime Minister's office says it's instructed the army to act forcefully against dozens of targets in Lebanon. Hezbollah denies it launched the rockets and says it's still committed to the ceasefire agreement. Doctors treating Pope Francis say he is well enough to be discharged from hospital tomorrow. The pontiff plans to make his first public appearance in 5 weeks on Sunday, offering a blessing from the window at Rome's Gemelli Hospital. The 88-year-old was admitted to the hospital on the 14th of February with double pneumonia. The influencers and self-proclaimed misogynists Andrew and Tristan Tate have returned from the US to Romania to face charges of human trafficking and sexual exploitation of women. Speaking to the press outside their house in Bucharest, the brothers, who hold US and British citizenship, said they were back because innocent men don't run from anything.
They kept saying we're a flight risk. We left and we came back. So all of these 3 years of imprisonment were a complete waste of time against innocent men who have never been tried. It is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty in a democracy. We have never been convicted of any crime anywhere on the planet ever. And as my brother said, we have our passports back. If we feel like a holiday, we'll take one. And if a court needs to speak to us, we'll be there because we are innocent.
Sky News can reveal lawyers for Harrods are proposing six-figure payouts to settle claims brought by sexual abuse survivors of the London department store's former owner, Mohammed Al-Fayed. I'm joined now by correspondent Emma Birchley, who's been following this story. And Emma, what is the detail of these proposed settlements?
So Sky's city editor Mark Kleinman has seen a document that was put together by MPL Legal. That's the organisation coordinating the compensation scheme on behalf of Harrods. Hundreds of women have come forward making claims of sexual assault by the Harrods boss, who sold Harrods after 25 years in 2010. What we're now hearing is detail of the compensation scheme, damages for what they've been through. Of course, he died in 2023 and any hope of justice through the criminal system died there. So we're talking about damages. Now, what we're reading is that it will depend, the amount they receive will depend on whether they choose what's being called a medical pathway or a non-medical pathway. And that medical pathway would mean they have to go through a psychiatric assessment. If they don't go that route, then it's up to £110,000 they will receive. If they're prepared to have this assessment, then bigger sums of money, actually close to £250,000, could be possible. So an initial payment of up to £200,000, then on top of that, possibly another £110,000, taking into account loss of earnings, for example, or the fact that they had to have certain treatment. So that's what's being offered. It'll take 6 months if they go for that medical assessment approach. So there may well turn out to be anger from some of the people who have made complaints saying, well, you know, we've been through enough of this already now to have to wait that time and go through that assessment. Certainly that's where we are, though, right now. Now, there has been a statement from Harrods. This is what they've said. It would be premature for us to comment on the nature and details of a scheme that is currently under consultation. We're actively inviting the valuable input from survivors and their legal representatives to establish the final scheme that aims to be survivor-first, trauma-informed and fair in its approach to compensation. Further updates will be provided once the consultation period is complete. It appears that we are actually getting very close to that stage. But of course, the women involved do have a choice. They can either go this route or they can actually take their case to court for damages. And according to the document that Sky has seen, in theory, the compensation payouts should be pretty similar, whether they go for that court option or the compensation scheme.
Emma, thank you. The victims are at the centre of all of this, we must remember. Thank you. The parents of a baby girl who died following what's been described as a gross failure by midwives say they hope the coroner's conclusion into her death will stop other families having to endure their trauma. Ida Locke failed to recover from a serious brain injury caused by a lack of oxygen when she was born in November 2019 at a hospital in Lancashire. Sky's health correspondent Laura Bundock reports.
We talk about her all the time. We see her every day, we blow her a kiss on the beach.
They call this Ida's Beach. It's where Sarah and Ryan scattered the ashes of their baby daughter. Ida Locke lived for just 7 days.
It was one of the toughest. Oh, I'm finally crying. It was awful. It was so tough. My world had shattered and I couldn't figure out what had gone wrong, what I'd missed, what hadn't we seen.
Ida died of a serious brain injury. Her family forced to fight for the truth.
How the trust have behaved to us, how they've put a huge wall in terms of trying to find those answers. It's been really hard.
The trust's initial investigation reported no issues with Ida's delivery. But a later inquiry found many failings.
That's the hurt, because that time that we've taken to fight and get these answers, and people knew. People had these answers, but they didn't give us them.
A coroner concluded there were 8 missed opportunities during Ida's delivery, with gross failures by midwives leading to her death. The findings are depressingly familiar. In 2015, a damning report into maternity services at the same trust, the Morecambe Bay Trust, found a catalogue of failings. Its author says families have been let down again.
It's unforgivable that that should still be happening after we've had all of those warning signs. These are not problems of isolated units. It's not a particular rogue unit that we're talking about here. It's a very widespread failure of culture in maternity services.
This one case highlights a much bigger issue. Reports and investigations into failing maternity units aren't working. The question now, what to do differently to fix a broken system? The coroner has sent his findings to the Health Secretary. In a statement, the Trust's chief nurse said, "We know none of this can take away the pain Ida's family and loved ones will be feeling. We know we need to do better and will be leaving no stone unturned to learn from the ways we failed and improve the care we provide in the future."
It should not be a test of endurance for bereaved and bewildered parents to work out what happened to their child. Hopefully today is the start of healing, and we can now grieve differently for Ida.
With just memories to hold, Ida's parents, at least now, have the painful truth.
It's changed me as a person, but we're 5 years on now. The anxiety, stress, just constant.
She's always going to be in our hearts, and that's what's driven us to continue to keep going, you know, for her. We owe it to her.
Laura Bundock, Sky News, Morecambe.
Children are getting the opportunity to learn more about the Second World War by sending and receiving letters to and from veterans. It's part of the VE Mail campaign, which has launched ahead of the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day on the 8th of May. Sky's North of England correspondent Katie Barnfield has been to a primary school in Salford to see it in action.
The year is 2025 and I am 103 years old.
Words from one generation to another. Tom Jones served as a bombardier in World War II, now invited to this Salford primary school to share a letter he wrote for the children.
I work closely with the Gurkhas and the Nepalese. The very, very best soldiers, the Gurkhas, the very best. People should know about what we went through, because there's no films or pictures about, there was no reporters in Burma, no photographers.
The day of victory in Europe. The 8th of May this year will be 80 years since VE Day, celebrating the formal surrender of Germany after the Second World War. Tom was called up aged just 17, serving in both Liverpool and Burma.
And in each box was 3 biscuits and a little round tin of meat of some description.
He's sharing his stories as part of a new project for the VE Day anniversary, connecting children with the last surviving veterans from World War II.
Under the VE Mail initiative, schools across the UK can apply to get a personalised letter from a veteran sharing their experiences of the war. Pupils can then write back with their own letters.
He said that it wasn't a great time to be in, that he made friends and he missed his wife dearly.
We think some of the stories are very amusing and funny, but then also some of them were sentimental, and we're very pleased that he's came and made us enjoy this afternoon.
At the time of VE Day, Tom was working as a wireless operator in the Burmese jungle and still has his skills in Morse code to this day.
We can engage the children through videos and through pictures, but actually having someone who has experienced that and can tell their story and their journey just engages the children in a way that we could not possibly do. Children now are using devices to do writing and texting, so actually writing letters really gives them that chance to think about vocabulary and how they can express themselves through letters.
We had the same birthday. She was 4 hours older than me.
These children will be among the last to hear first-hand from World War II veterans, but sharing these letters will preserve their stories for many more years to come. Katie Barnfield, Sky News in Salford.
What a wonderful scheme. Time now to get all the latest sports news with Alice.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
It's no secret Wenger needs world-class defenders. Dozens of clubs are sure to be keeping an eye on Campbell's contract talks.
Arsenal always had to identify the talent. It was never my decision, because he had to coach them, he had to motivate them, he had to train them, and I have actually executed his wishes. Once we knew that Sol Campbell could be available, then we had to go into overdrive, because he was such a prized possession.
Arsenal's history, we were trying to win trophies, and by adding Sol Campbell to that defence, it meant that we were going to win more trophies, because he was that much of a good player.
If you want to be successful at club level, then you've got to keep your best players, and Sol Campbell, without a shadow of a doubt, is one of those.
Obviously, it's so important to the team. I mean, Sol's a great player. I'm sure if Sol was put up for sale, then every club in the world maybe would want Sol Campbell in their team.
He's a very private person. No one really knew what was going on in the background. There must have been huge amounts going on, a lot of speculation. Never about Arsenal, by the way, always about Inter Milan or Bayern Munich. And I think that would have been accepted from the Tottenham faithful.
So it's so long Sol, as one of the most drawn-out sagas of the season finally ends. The club feel Campbell's wage demands were excessive.
We're disappointed at what perhaps I would term the slightly unacceptable face of where football is going to at this moment in time. A contract demand of around £140,000 a week, frankly, is obscene. At the end of the day, the market will determine exactly what he's going to get. The club did its very best.
Did you demand this basic salary that Spurs have talked about of £130,000 to £140,000 a week to stay at the club?
No.
Some reports, wherever they came from, said that you even asked for a £7 million signing on fee on top of that.
Not true.
And generally, how do you feel about the way the club's behaved?
Disappointed.
Hurt. But Sol was a character that, remember, he was the lowest paid player in the England team. He was one of the lowest paid players in the Tottenham team. But his focus wasn't about money, because if it was, then you would just go, where's my contract? I want more money. And no one talks about the fact that he put that to the side and said, I will do something when I'm ready. And nobody should be forced into signing a contract or anything like that.
Pretty much understand that, if someone hasn't signed a contract, there's a good chance they'll leave. So first and foremost, if you're a player and you're left behind and he's gone, you want to see who else is coming in, see if we can replace him. He was almost irreplaceable, so. But it was and I understand it was very difficult for the fans to digest and the club. But to actually lose a player of that quality and get nothing for him was a huge blow.
A lot of people have got opinions on my life. And it's about time I've had an opinion on my own life.
So now the negotiations can begin in earnest. Sol Campbell can name his price and pick his club pretty much anywhere in Europe. Tottenham's fans recognise that now, but there is one condition. Please don't make it Arsenal.
He knows, and his agent knows, where we stand on it.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers and the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by Christina Patterson and Albie Amankona. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of The Observer, their headline, all families to be worse off by 2030 as poor bear the brunt. Stay with us for more on that story and others. We'll be right back.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland Correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Lough Neagh. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the President as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back. You are watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. The Energy Secretary has ordered an urgent investigation into how a fire caused a power outage at Heathrow, forcing the airport to shut. Harrods has proposed 6-figure settlements to settle claims brought by sexual abuse victims of Mohammed Al Fayed, but has told survivors damages will depend upon claimants' willingness to submit to a psychiatric assessment. Tributes have been paid to former world heavyweight boxing champion George Foreman, who's died aged 76. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines, with journalist and author Christina Patterson and broadcaster and financial analyst Albie Amankona. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, The Observer leads with the story that living standards are set to fall for all families in the UK by 2030. The Telegraph reports that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is taking an axe to the civil service in a move that they say could result in thousands of job losses. The Express claims that what it describes as the asylum crisis is wrecking our communities. The Mail leads with the headline, Met's craven surrender to the BLM mob. The Mirror has the exclusive that Stephen Lawrence's father has urged one of his son's killers to name the rest of the gang who murdered him. The Times reports that thousands of students are suspected of fraudulently claiming hundreds of millions of pounds from Britain's university loan system. And The Star claims that 1 million Brits wake up the neighbours with their bedtime snoring? Yes. Or snorting. Actually, it says snorting. I'd like to know what the difference is. Interesting. We are joined tonight by Christina Patterson and Albie Amankona. We're not going to be discussing that story.
Pigs. It means you've got pigs sleeping in your bed.
Yes, very strange headline. We shall delve deeper, but I'm sure we won't be discussing the difference between snorting and snoring. We're going to start with a serious story, and this on the front page of The Observer. Their headline, all families to be worse off by 2030 as poor bear the brunt. This is from some Joseph Rowntree Foundation stats. Albie, take us into this.
It's a very depressing headline, I think, for anyone reading this story that's going to be in The Observer tomorrow. Essentially, it's from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which is quite an important think tank, probably on the centre-left of British politics. But they're really quite damning, actually, probably, on Labour's strategy for where we're going to go in between now and 2030. And they think that living standards are going to fall for everyone. They're also talking about the cuts that the Chancellor may have to implement after the spring statement, which is, of course, upcoming very soon. So it's not painting a very good picture for the UK, but there are some structural problems with our economy that I would probably agree with this analysis on. We look at the levels of productivity that we have, they're very low. Economic growth is very sclerotic. We've got an ageing population and a shrinking labour force, which is pushing up public spending over time. So unless something changes quite radically, yes, living standards will fall, and we're not even talking about the fact that we're having to spend more on defence. So a lot of challenges on the public purse towards the end of the decade.
Yeah, really depressing reading, Kristen.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that headline, you think, oh, great, you know, things feel bad now. You know, you do think, you know, the Labour came into power on a promise of change, and I don't think this was a change that people felt they were voting for. But I do actually agree with everything that Albie just said. I think there are structural problems, and the benefit cuts that have been announced, which have understandably gone down extremely badly with an awful lot of people. I mean, that is part of the picture, that we have 1 million young people who normally would be in a workforce and aren't. And we have, post-COVID, many more people who are out of work and not in education or employment, again, among young people, than our European counterparts. So there is something going wrong with our economy. And you know, let's be clear that these are extremely turbulent times. Albie mentioned defence. Given what Donald Trump is doing, you know, 5 minutes ago and 2 minutes ago and 1 minute ago, which obviously changes every 10 seconds, the one thing that's pretty clear is that he cannot be counted on in security terms. And if Europe wants to remain peaceful, apart from Ukraine, and indeed wants to support Ukraine, we are going to have to enormously increase defence budgets, which very, very sadly, will have an enormous effect for other services, because we can't just, you know, Rachel Reeves doesn't have the option. I know plenty of people are suggesting she should do this, but she's put her fiscal rules in for a reason, because the cost of borrowing will, you know, you can't just accommodate that and then keep, that will add enormously to you know, public spending ultimately. So, I mean, their options are very narrow. What is depressing and worrying about this report is that the suggestion is that the poorest are going to pay the highest price. And since the poor generally pay the highest price for everything, that clearly isn't good news.
Yes, as the paper says, blow for PM over living standards pledge, and that obviously would deplete the living standards of the poorest, as you say. Rachel Reeves, obviously the name and the woman of the moment, with the statement coming up this week. We turn to the Sunday Telegraph and read that she will be taking an axe to the civil service, will order them to save £2 billion a year in a move that unions say could result in tens of thousands of government jobs being axed.
So this is actually a policy that I wholeheartedly agree with, and the economic picture can look very depressing at the moment, and the last story and this story sound quite depressing. But there is a way out of this, and one of the ways out of this is to spend the money that the government does take in tax receipts better. And I think trimming the civil service back to closer to levels that we had before the pandemic is probably a good way to do that. The civil service has ballooned, according to this article, by 100,000 since the pandemic. Now, obviously, we know what those civil servants were doing. They were helping with the administration of all the pandemic policy. They were also helping with the administration of Brexit. Now, those two problems are no longer as big a problems as they were in the past. I think it's right that the civil service right-sizes.
Christina, do you agree with that? Because it's not just the civil service, is it? It's other departments being asked to make administrative costs of 50% by 2030.
50%? 15%. Well, I do agree with Albie, actually. I think if the civil service increased by 100,000 jobs and the talk is of axing 10,000 jobs, obviously that's awful for the people who are losing their jobs, but that's still 90,000 more civil servants than we had before the pandemic. And I'm afraid there is wastage in the system, and one of the things that's talked about here is procurement. I think a lot of government procurement is very inefficient. You know, very often when people look into it, they can source things more economically. And I think AI, using technology more wisely, AI is going to change absolutely everything. You know, we're either going to be you know, in tune with this thing and allowing it to support and help us, or we're going to be overtaken by it, and then it's going to be, it's going to be a life-changing, world-changing thing. But we need to harness it now in ways that help us and which do save the taxpayer money. So I do actually support this, and I don't think Rachel Reeves has any choice other than to trim government departments. I think there is inefficiency, but, you know, clearly it has to be done very carefully.
You sound a bit like Elon Musk.
I definitely do not sound like Elon Musk, because I'm not sending in ill-qualified or indeed completely unqualified youngsters who have been unable to get any other job to go in and steal everybody's data and make random firings.
But this is an area that you both think public opinion will be akin to the cuts in the civil service. It's not something
I think it probably will be. Obviously, if you are a civil servant or are married to a civil servant, you'll feel very differently. And honestly, my heart goes out to anyone who loses their job. I wouldn't actively want anyone to lose their job, but, you know, we are talking about necessity here. And I think, and maybe, you know, out of the number of people who are there, it may well be that quite a few of these can go through a voluntary redundancy. It could well be that they would hit the 10,000 by doing that.
We shall see. We shall see on that. Let's move to the Mirror, and this is an exclusive from the Mirror. They've spoken to the father of Stephen Lawrence, who is now saying to one of the killers of his son that he should name others that were involved in the gang on that fateful night of that terrible murder. Albie.
Yes, David Norris has finally admitted that he was actually at the scene when Stephen Lawrence was murdered back in 1993. I think it's amazing that this story is still making headlines more than 30 years later. It's something which many black families across the country still talk about. We drive past the site of where it happened on the way to my aunt's church, which is down in Kent, and she actually took me to the site that it happened. And it's something that affected the black community, but in fact the entire country so deeply. You know, not just the Mirror, but even there were front pages of the Mail at the time talking about how awful this was. So I think it's good that we haven't forgotten about it. It's absolutely heartbreaking to me that both Baroness Lawrence and Neville Lawrence still don't actually know the names of the people that killed their 18-year-old son in cold blood back in 1993.
There is some hope now that those names will be given up by David Norris, now that he has admitted to being at the scene.
Yeah, I mean, it was really a seminal moment in British history, actually, Stephen Lawrence's murder. I don't think any of us, well, I hope that none of us who were following the news at that time will forget the power of what happened. And it did have long-reaching effects for the police, which was found guilty of institutional racism. It was absolutely horrific what was uncovered in that report, and the links that some of the alleged murderers had to police officers. And I think the agony that I've met Baroness Lawrence, she's an extraordinary woman. The agony that she and Neville Lawrence went through is unimaginable. And I think we should also mention the Mail here, which fought a very strong campaign to get justice for his killers. And, you know, many of us don't support the Mail's politics in all kinds of ways, but that is one way in which they absolutely have fought for justice.
The hope is now that the family can get true justice and further closure on this horrific crime. As you say, over 30 years ago, but still rings very, very deep with many people. We are going to take a break now. Thank you both for the moment. Coming up, the investigation into Britain's energy resilience after Heathrow's power outage. Stay with us for more on that.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. I've witnessed migration across Europe close up.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Free, wherever you get your news.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent. Sky News, the full story first.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News, the full story first.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted. She was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We are under
Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film. But it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Christina Patterson and Albie Amankona. Let's take a look in this section at the Express front page and their headline, Asylum Crisis Wrecking Our Communities. The Sunday Express front page looking at this story. But Albie, what do you make of the headline in itself? I mean, do you think it's scaremongering? Does the article present the evidence to back this headline up?
It's a pretty sensationalist headline, and it's certainly going to get people's eyeballs and their tongues wagging. And it is an issue that a lot of people in this country are very concerned about. Labour today has just announced that it's looking at sending Channel migrants to Albania as a deterrent. It sounds quite similar to the Conservatives' idea to send them to Rwanda, but perhaps Albania is a more palatable country. So the point is, both the major parties understand that this is an issue that bothers the public very much, and it's actually driving up support for parties that are further on the right of the Conservatives, such as the Reform Party. So it's absolutely right that the major parties come up with a solution to this. Now, with regards to this article, these Channel migrants are having a significant impact on some communities. If we just look at some of the figures that they're talking about here, 5,000 people have arrived since the beginning of this year, 24% than I believe the same period as last year. A number of asylum seekers have been in expensive hotel accommodation. Businesses, these hotel businesses are quite often the centre of some communities, and these communities have completely changed as a result of these hotels being filled with Channel migrants. Now, that is not to say all of them are illegal migrants that are coming here economically, but the idea that this isn't having an impact on communities is false, and there's a reason why all the major parties want to tackle it.
But, Christina, is there evidence for this, the subheadline, Councils fear outbreaks of violence on Britain's streets?
But if there is, it must be hidden on page 643 or something, because there is absolutely no sign of that evidence here. I think it's absolutely ridiculous, given everything that's happening in the world at the moment, and given that we are in a really, really serious situation in terms of European security because of Donald Trump's behaviour, and the fact that there is an actual war and that Putin is threatening to extend that war, that the front page of any newspaper at the moment is something as misleading as this, that asylum crisis wrecking our communities. Of course there is an issue with immigration. The bigger issue is the fact that the Tories brought us Brexit largely, or a very significant feature of that was people's feelings about immigration, the feeling that there was too much immigration in this country. And then what the Tories did was brought us net immigration of nearly 1 million. So record numbers of immigration. And then we're focusing here on 38,000 people who've come over here on small boats, which is not to say that in the communities they're put in, they might have an impact. You know, there are towns which have not been very well prepared, which take an unusually high, sort of probably a higher proportion than other towns. I'm not saying that has
So there is
no
evidence
impact.
for the headline, then?
There's evidence that there is absolutely no evidence of outbreaks of violence on Britain's streets. There is evidence that it causes unease. But I think what causes much greater unease is having people come in, like nearly 1 million came in, I think it was 2023, that causes much more, that has a much bigger burden on society than this does. And I think it's really irresponsible to fuel racist sentiment in the way that this front page has done.
OK, we're just going to move on just because of time. We've only got about a minute, Albie, to talk about the lessons apparently forgotten after COVID. This is the Observer front page.
Yes, on the front page of The Observer. Not a very nice front page on The Observer. First telling us we're all going to be poorer by 2030 and second telling us that we've forgotten the lessons of COVID. This report also says that they think if there was another pandemic, because not enough progress has been made, actually it would probably be worse than the one before because we've not learnt enough lessons. So not easy reading on the front of The Observer.
No, indeed not.
So it's all looking quite gloomy.
Albie and Christina, thank you very much for taking us through the papers this hour. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, Heathrow is now fully operational after a power outage, but airlines warn passengers still face delays.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics